What's up, guys? Mitch from RespectMyRegion.com here with another RMR podcast episode. Today, I'm sitting down with entrepreneur August Battles of Vance Global. How you doing today, August?
I'm doing good. How are you, Mitch?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. So you have a crazy story that we'll get into in a little bit, but
Yeah.
essentially, as a Gen Zer, as a younger guy, you took a very small sizable investment into the Delta-8 and CBD THC realm and have turned that into quite the business, man. So, first off, I got to give you a salute. You're one of, I think, only two people that we've interviewed in your age range. So it's always dope to see young people doing big things, man.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to get started of like, a little bit before we get into, Vance Global and what that is, man. I really want to get a little bit of like the start of just your business acumen. Like, what inspired you to be an entrepreneur, to start your own business? Has it been something you've always had, or was it just like an opportunity that you eventually saw and seized?
Yeah, I mean, it started as I always kind of knew when I was younger I had good like leadership skills. I like failed every class I ever had, but for some reason kids would listen to me when I was in their class, which doesn't make any sense. So I always knew it would be like kind of an easy route to go. Um, and then as I kind of got out of high school, didn't really know what to do with myself, my life. I was doing music a lot locally. And then I kind of just fell into it a little bit, um, figured out it's a lot easier to sell a product than it is to sell a person. Um, so yeah, that's kind of, I guess, I don't know. I never really saw myself as like the business type necessarily, but
Yeah, and that's interesting. Obviously, I was sharing a little bit with you off mic before we started that we came from the music sector, and I've done a lot in that space. Still continue to do, and I am always very vocal on. Music is one of the hardest things you will ever sell. Up and coming musician, right? If you're a mainstream celebrity that has an audience, right, it's much like thinking of a product, right? You have an audience, you have distribution, you have a product. When you're a unsigned, independent, up and coming artist, you have to build demand. And it is very, so I guess I should, in speaking this out loud for like the 300th time, I'm realizing, I guess I shouldn't say music's the hardest thing to sell. Music's one of the hardest things to sell, demand, build demand for. And I've known many local musicians switch to other industries and build very successful businesses because I think they've just, they've gotten very thick skin,
right.
sharpening that sword of trying to promote music. So very interesting that you came from that space. How did you get started with Vance Global? When did you start identifying that was a particular industry that you wanted to get into?
So in 2018, I was working like, odd jobs mixed with like being a cook at restaurants and like assisting at offices and whatnot. Um, and then I had a friend that was worked for a distributor that was selling like vape juice and whatnot. And, I came up with like an idea like, oh, I think this is kind of where the market's going to go in a few years. And it was, THC cigarettes. Um, and about 2 months later, they, released the farm bill. And I was like, all right, this CBD stuff, this CBD flower kind of looks exactly like the real thing. It'd be good to make machinery um, and make a brand and then just kind of have it go into that. So it started off just rolling cigarettes in a garage with my friend. And, it kind of blew up immediately. Um, just because I think what we got into was so niche. Like a lot of people that I know are trying to jump into it now or later, they try to jump into like lotions or like lip balms and stuff. Or like, obviously the oil and stuff is good, but as far as like jumping in late and if you don't have a lot of money, I think I kind of hit the nail on the head and got lucky with sort of a niche market um, as far as the cigarettes go. So
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of, not only is there hype around CBD, there's also the push for the alternative to other things. And when you talk about, the cigarettes, right? Like I don't know too many cigarette smokers that aren't actively seeking or speaking about their desire to not smoke cigarettes. And so offering like an alternative that is, safer, it's definitely a market that's there. And I completely agree with what you're saying. And when you look at the CBD market, it's definitely overpopulated with topicals and wellness and like granola yoga-y brands, but not to one of the core products like a cigarette that's been a huge economic driver in this country for, I don't even know, a century. I don't even know how long. I mean, cigarettes probably been around longer than that. So it's interesting you grabbed the foothold on that particular product. And so at what point did you realize like, okay, this is not only is it a good idea, but traction is really coming to this product?
Within the first month. So I was just rolling cigarettes after work. I would roll cigarettes, I'd get off work at around, 5 p.m. and then roll until like 9 or 10. Within that first, I want to say couple of weeks, we got an order from a distributor for like, I think he wanted 50,000 packs of the cigarettes. So he put in an order initially of half of that, gave us like 50, 60 grand. And I'd never really seen more than like maybe $2,000 in like my bank account or anything. So when I saw 50 grand, it was like, holy cow, this is a pretty big deal. And then the second month we doubled, and the third month we tripled, and it became pretty evident that this was going to be more than just a side thing to make a couple extra bucks. So, I mean, once you quit your jobs and you kind of rely on yourself to get that weekly payment, you kind of have to go all in, which is exactly what I did. So.
And then, so what were some of those initial challenges, obviously, or challenges you had to overcome going from, rolling these yourself to getting an order of, 50,000 units? That's quite a sizable scale, and probably, obviously a lot more than you could do by yourself. Was it recruiting more friends and people you knew to help? Did you actively seek at that point, like outsourcing or machinery, or kind of would that process go from like, okay, this is just a little side gig to like, damn, we're doing this at scale and we got to deliver quickly?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing obviously was like production. So my goal was to make the product as cheap as possible. So when I say cigarettes, it's basically like a 10 pack of pre-rolls. At the time, I had only seen pre-rolls that were sold like singularly, and they'd sell them for like 30, 40 bucks. I'm like, this is crazy. You might as well be buying the real thing. So I wanted to make a 10 pack at the same price as what a regular pack of cigarettes would be. And in order to do that, at that level, you had to hire on, a shit ton of staff, which kind of raises your cost on those things. So the main hurdle in the beginning was machinery, because obviously everything that's ever been rolled cigarette-wise is manufactured to roll tobacco. And the consistency of tobacco is a lot different than the consistency of cannabis. So in the early days, we saw a lot of the competitors that came after us trying to make that cannabis flower, that CBD flower, mimic tobacco. So they would add leaf to it. They would add all these kinds of different things, and it doesn't even taste like it at the end of the day. So the main thing was manufacturing that machinery, which I had never had any sort of like engineering experience or anything whatsoever. I just knew that it had to be done. And I was obsessed enough, I think, with that. I would say that the next hurdle was definitely getting all the logistical things in order, because I'm not really a logistical guy, So, but you want to protect yourself. You want to make sure you're paying people in the right way. You want to make sure you got a business license, all the licensing, which can be it was hard to navigate because none of the banks wanted to open up for cannabis businesses or cannabis alternative businesses. So you have to now they're okay about it, but in the beginning you have to go in and lie. They ask you what business it is, and you got to be like, oh, it's a herbal business, and whatever the hell. But there was just little stuff like that. I was 21 at the time, so a lot of older people in the business realm already kind of, trying to take advantage of you as far as nickel and diamond the whole time when you sell the product. So, but Nothing too crazy. Nothing too crazy, really.
And so, in this distribution, right? You started out having some friends that were a part of that distribution channel. How much
Mhm.
effort did you have to put into like pounding the ground in sales versus like working with his distributors? Because from my understanding, right, like the traditional cannabis space, a sales guy's got to go knock on doors. Maybe he'll meet a chain that has 3 to 10 stores. You're obviously dealing with with in your realm a much broader audience of distribution points where you can also work with a distribution person who will have like distribution to an entire region. So were you kind of focused at that start of finding, one, two, three outlets, or were you really pinpointed in on finding like big distributors that could really advance product at scale?
It was everything in between.
Mm,
I wanted to have a list of stores that we sold to directly, consumers that we sold to directly, as well as medium to large scale distributors. It was a lot of going door to door. It was a lot of going on trips. And when you're starting off in a new business where there's only a few $1,000s in the bank account, but you got, you know, 30 employees, it could be a little risky to send somebody out, and go out on a trip to Texas or, Florida or, East Coast, because you could be out 2-3 grand if you don't make a sale. So you obviously you want a distro in the beginning. Um, just from my point of view, I know a lot of people don't go that way. A lot of people stick to online or they stick to just direct to store. But my main goal is just kind of brand recognition.
mhm.
Um, so
Yeah, I know a lot of people that have gone the e-commerce route because they want to control the supply, the supply chain down to distribution, the customer experience, if you will. But obviously, going that route poses an entirely new set of challenges of like advertising and marketing in the cannabis Delta-8 THC and CBD space. And it's very difficult to build and scale. And it's another very crowded market, right?
yeah,
And so, how much? I mean, obviously, starting in 2018 was pretty early, right? Like the last 2 years we've really seen this boom, and like the last year we've really seen Delta-8 boom. So at what point did you start branching out from CBD to exploring other cannabinoids like Delta-8?
um, so COVID. I mean, we were able to do, you know, well into the seven figures our first year with just one SKU, which is kind of rare.
Wow.
Just selling one product. We didn't have 50 other products. And I always wanted to keep it that way because if you could do it with one product, then you keep that quality control. But COVID really changed a lot of things, and I don't think we've like fully comprehended how it's changed commerce in the
Mm,
United States. Um, my main focus during COVID, obviously, when all the stores shut down and all the distros had to close down, was to focus more e-commerce based. And CBD was kind of it's something that people needed during COVID. And then Delta-8 came out, and it was something that people also needed during COVID. And the convenience of that, just having it delivered as opposed to having a dealer come to you when he's got to wear a mask and all kinds of stuff. I think was a really good thing. But there's all different kinds of to answer your question. There's all different kinds of alternatives right now that are coming out, and there's going to be more and more and more. Um, and I'm going to try and have a cigarette or a gummy for absolutely every single one of them
mm.
going forward. At least the ones that I think are going to be people are going to like. So that way we could just be a one-stop shop. You just go to our website. We kind of are like that right now, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's been a hot topic. I reside in Washington where cannabis is legal, and we had an issue where people were taking Delta-8 and converting it, synthesizing it to Delta-9, selling them. I don't know, create this big stir within the industry, the cannabis industry, the traditional THC industry up here, and so in Washington, as far as the industry has this like really bad taste, but it's also a lot of miseducation around the subject of Delta-8. But you and I were talking about a little bit before we started this of just how impactful having these cannabis alternatives to THC, which is federally illegal, is, especially in these states that cannabis is illegal. And, some states, you get a fairly severe punishment for something that you can get in Forbes magazine for in the state next door. How much is your business happening in states where cannabis is illegal versus states where cannabis is legal?
Yeah, I mean, well, the main states that Google and look to buy cannabis are in the South right now, as far as just singular consumers go. When you look at it on an average scale, I think like there's definitely that sort of mentality where there's a lot of people that want it, they can't have it, so they order it, and they're more likely to order online in those southern states as well. Um, so it's definitely been a lot. I think you're right on the money with that for sure. Um, Texas, unfortunately, Texas. I know we were talking about that earlier, but Texas is a big one too. But it's pretty risky per se to sell anything in Texas sometimes. So I've had salespeople get arrested down there. I've had packages seized down there
With Delta-8 and CBD?
with just CBD. Some, yeah, and yeah, 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. So
And on those, we don't have to get into that, but on those situations, were you able to get the product back, or cease forever?
no, it gets ceased forever. Yeah, you kind of just get ceased
Yeah.
forever. They treat it, but there's a lot going on down there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen that there's some recent talks, and so that's another thing, is like, what are some of the challenges you faced, over scaling this business with the, being on the forefront of some of these, like Delta-8 is pretty new, and I take it you were probably there right around the start, and so with that being so new, legislation and the discussion and regulation has changed pretty significantly around that, but also with, CBD and the USPS, like, not wanting it and then acknowledging it, but then the issues with vape. And so there's been all these issues that are not issues, but subjects that have came up and created issues around regulation. So how have you stayed up navigating that? And do you get to sleep at night trying to stay in tune with all the laws of these individual states?
Yeah, you just got to keep an eye out. Everything. It's what's crazy is somebody can order a product of mine online completely legally, in like Vermont or something, and then by the time it gets to them in 2 days, it's illegal. You know what I mean? If they switch these laws overnight, it's like, what the hell's going on? Um, it's it's kind of weird, you know. But it's like, is it legal or is it not? I don't know. Like, is it a freedom or is it not? It's just I'm doing something completely legal, but sometimes I still feel like I'm like, you know, a drug kingpin or something. So
Absolutely. And I know you alluded to it earlier with banking, but that's definitely been another issue, is not just banking, but for you selling online, e-commerce is payment processing. And so has
yeah,
that kind of tamed down as of late? I know there was a good period, maybe a year or two back, where there was a lot of, just, I don't know, all the guys that were doing it were no longer doing it. And it seemed like most of the people I knew were kind of switching payment processor every few months.
yeah.
Um,
It was a real pain in the ass. It was You would get by with a payment processor and then they would change the rules, or you'd have a payment processor and there's stipulations on what you can and can't do, and then it would change, and then all of a sudden now your website's down. Now you got a bunch of people that you can't you know put orders in, and you're kind of just pissing money away. Thankfully there was a couple payment processors that were able to kind of climb through and be legitimized and go forward uh, that. So we haven't had any issues with that since 2019.
Yeah, that's good to hear. It's definitely, I mean, it's definitely getting ironed out. And as we kind of continually approach this impending, federal legalization of cannabis in general, or at least declassification. I know everyone's starting to loosen up a little bit more, and the industry is getting aligned with more mature businesses in these other ancillary spaces. For you, for your company, like right at this point now, what is kind of the look? I mean, obviously, you still, I've looked on the site, and you guys might have more products than just on the site, but you're still offering the original CBD product, correct?
Correct.
And then how much has it changed, like adding the Delta-8 SKUs? Is that has the demand for the original CBD product kind of slowed down or dropped and Delta-8 took a hold? Or is it kind of a whole different vertical where that's still holding strong, and then now you have this new SKU that's just adding to business?
I would definitely say, I would say it is not slowed down. It's kept its pace. It's definitely stopped growing. Like the people that are interested in CBD now, like I think everybody that was ever going to be interested in it kind of got into it already. And Delta-8 is just kind of new. It's the thing that keeps rising. It's that sort of excitement period again. And then there'll be another thing that'll come out in a couple months, I'm sure. And yeah, but it hasn't slowed anything down. No.
And for you too, I know you alluded to wanting to have, a couple product SKUs around every cannabinoid that comes out, it has demand for it. How do you look for and justify, okay, this product has demand? Do you kind of wait until the market is showing you that, or you feel like at this point you have a little bit of intuition, or is it a little bit of both?
I listen to the reviews of what people say, so I'll make like a little prototype of some stuff, and then I'll just have, give it out to a bunch of people, see what they think. Because there's a lot of, snake oil stuff comes out every once in a while, where it's more or less like, it's like a slap chop buy at something you buy. Oh, I want that. When you're at the counter at the, grocery store. As far as like CBD and Delta-8, they're two things that are, people are going to like it, if it's something that they're into for sure. But I remember CBG came out a couple years ago and everybody said that was going to be better than CBD. And then people were like, it's the same thing. So I'm trying to avoid those sort of unnecessary types, simply just because I don't want, 50 million things on a website when somebody's only looking for the real shit. So, tried and true for sure.
Absolutely. And that's definitely a big thing that's happened to the entire space in general, is like chasing that hype. And at a certain point, it's not a sustainable business model to chase everything that is hyped. It's
Right.
more about staying true to your core pieces of business, your core pillars of business, and then, strategically adding to that. What's your big vision for the end goal, if you don't mind sharing with us, of where you want to see this company taken?
Yeah, I mean, the end goal is for it to be when, when tobacco started a couple hundred years ago, everybody was just buying the tobacco and the leaf and putting it in a pipe. It took a couple hundred years for it to evolutionize into, the joint form where you roll your own. And then another 100 years for it to, be mass produced in a pack where there was a filter and it was common and it was cheaper than just, buying it yourself and convenient. I see Vance Global being a name brand in the cannabis industry as a whole for just pure smokable. I know we got the vape thing and everybody's going to go onto the vape, but there's always going to be people out there that just like burning shit in front of their face. There's going to be people that want to smoke on their lunch break without having to bring a bong to work. There's going to be people that just want to go to the store, buy a pack of Vance Globals, and just be able to smoke them freely throughout the day. The cigarette design works because it's more convenient, and I see the end goal of this, it being huge. And obviously that's just me talking as a business owner. I'm not, trying to blow smoke up my own ass or something, but yeah, that's kind of what I want.
No, I can see it. I mean, and clearly you're off to a big start of building with this business. Um, definitely one of the bigger stories. There's been a few people that have cut through. Like we said, there's a lot of people that have jumped on CBD or Delta-8 hype. Maybe built an e-commerce business or tried to do the drop shipping route. There's so much emphasis in our culture that's like we're addicted to the you see a headline like the headline that we'll probably have for you, and people are like, I want to do that, and just like take an overnight approach thinking, right? Like, how can I make the most amount of money in the least amount of time when, some people can strike luck, on those situations, but it's really a brick by brick thing. And so how much do you attribute, like, I mean, obviously I'm sure it's been a lot of long days and long nights, but how much do you attribute your success of being like right timing? And then how much do you attribute of like really just grinding and just doing the grueling, tedious day after day task?
Oh, it's at this level, I think most of the people that got in it and got lucky are, COVID did them in. So I think there's it's a little bit of both, but there's definitely a lot of grinding that happened in the beginning, for sure. So, and the money and everything is good, as you mentioned, but it's more or less just sort of it gives me the ability to kind of live and direct sort of the life I want right now. Being like, the stoner kid, you don't want to have to get up for class. You don't have to tell people, have people telling you what to do all the time, telling you not to smoke, getting yelled at by your mom or the cops or some shit. So
Mhm.
this kind of has been able to, prove to myself that as a smoker, I can be hardworking. I can grind. I'm not lazy on the couch, like that typical stereotype. It's, I smoke because I like it. And I've been able to kind of prove that to myself and other people. So,
Absolutely. That's such the important thing about cannabis legalization and the continued conversation of that is, breaking the stigma, and through this legalization and accessibility of different components of the plant, it's allowed many people to share their story that I think other people can relate to or look at. It's hard to look at a kid that it started at 21 and built a business to the scale that you have by age 24 and try to apply a stigma like, oh, lazy stoner, right?
right.
It doesn't match up with the tagline there. And I think that's an important thing about continually uh sharing these stories. So I mean, obviously, at the start we were talking about, the business kind of took off quickly, but at what point in the last, I mean, 3 years is not that long of a time, especially when you count the last two of COVID being so unique. But what point did you sit back and get that moment where you finally kind of pulled your head out of the grind and sat back and were just like, wow, like this is what I'm doing is impressive.
Um, it would probably, probably like maybe early on, I would say there's like levels. Obviously, the first time was being a boss, because I had never been a boss for anybody in my life, So having that happen, having to where I was bussing tables, and then a few months later, I have 40 employees under my belt. That was definitely kind of a big thing. Um, and then, being able to like move out of the office, because I was living at the office for several months. So being able to move out of that and buy like a nice apartment was pretty cool too. That's kind of those staples of, oh, I did it, you know, but
Yeah. And so how much did it take like internally? I mean, again, you said you were, felt like you had some leadership qualities at a young age, but to go from like, busting tables, which is not that high on the totem pole at a restaurant, right? Or working as a
yeah.
server to, having 40 employees, like, did you have to kind of overcome or internalize any form of like confidence or education? Or you felt like once you got put in that position, you're like, oh man, I'm built for this.
I mean, I, I, I guess, you know, I don't, I guess that's kind of a deep question. Yeah. I would say that I think I was definitely built for this. But I just didn't know it yet in the beginning, for sure. So that confidence kind of comes out a little bit later. But yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to take it too deep.
No, that
When
was
we're on
good.
air sharing a joint,
That
maybe
was
that's
good.
better
I'm gonna be
reserved for
dreaming
the
about that
DJ.
tonight. I'm gonna really think about that. Yeah.
Hey man, I come from taking these deep questions in a circle or a session. That's
Right.
where, where the
Right.
inspiration comes from. What are what are some pieces of advice that you have for other young entrepreneurs out there that have just an idea that they've kind of been they're working a job and they're mulling over this idea. What are some pieces of advice that you give that your older self, what not older in age but past self?
Um, yeah, I would just say, keep being, obsessed. That that obsessive nature is good. I think in people, some people just direct it towards other things. I think everybody has it, um, and like try not to worry too much for sure. Obviously, failing all my classes in school kind of prepared me that the world was going to be, you know, super unachievable and success was going to be unachievable, and that everybody who's ever going to be rich is rich already and their parents are going to give them a bunch of money. But it's not like that. It's just you got to run a little quicker, I think. So, but I don't know.
Fail forward, man. Not
Yeah.
being scared to fail, right?
Yeah.
That's such a big part of it. What do you think did you feel like, did you have mentorship, or was there any advice given to you at a certain, like an earlier point in your journey, or you feel like it was more like what you've learned is definitely rooted in experience?
Um, yeah. I mean, it's definitely rooted in experience. Like I would give like my main, um, just like the whole kind of like obsessive nature and the kind of keep going, obviously with the building and the machinery and getting over the hurdles is, the thing for me was just like learning an instrument was really good because it's not something you could do with some cheat codes overnight. Like it takes years to really like get good in an instrument. You suck for a long time. So I would kind of put maybe a little bit towards that for sure. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
learn
I
an
mean
instrument.
that's a great analogy. I haven't used that a ton, but I mean it's a great analogy, right? You can't fake an instrument. I know when I was in college, man, I took a business class and I knew like math, you could get partial credit. Certain things you could like game the system, but when it
Yeah,
came to music, you can't. When you step up, you could either play or not. You either put the work
yeah,
in or you have it, and it will for sure be shown. And to my case, it was to public display a few times.
right,
So
right.
that's wild. What sector of like what genre of music did you play in?
So I played guitar. I could never find any bandmates because I was moving around all the time. So I just did like guitar, like acoustic and singing. Um, so I did like 200 shows in
Wow.
2018, just doing like bars and like you know coffee shops and outside weird things. Um, Most of it you don't get paid. So as far as rolling a couple packs of cigs and being able to sell them, it was like, damn, this is fucking piece of cake. So
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, that's why I always akin anything in music, any hustle in music, you do it for the passion or for the love. You do not do it for the financial
no,
reward,
no,
because if you get
not at
into
all.
it, it's definitely a lot of luck,
Yeah,
and a lot of effort on the front end before you see anything on the back end. When it comes to music, and so it's just funny to hear your story and to know you're in music. It's like, oh, that's where he got it. Like that's the ultimate, you want to talk about failing forward or putting your all into something and, getting pretty much nothing back for it, other than
definitely.
just internal value. Right. And then you apply that to a hustle where it's like, all right, I can put the same level of intensity and passion and effort into something and like, there's something out from it. Right. And so, um, would you also attribute that to, I mean, you kind of alluded to it on that last answer, but being able to shift from putting something into a passion, but putting that same level of effort into something and getting something back from it. Do you feel like that was also an early inspiration for you to be like, all right, I'm gonna keep pursuing this?
Yeah. I mean, that first month when we got that, $50,000 order, it was like, oh shit. Like I thought for sure I was going to have to throw 2-3 years into this to even
Mm.
touch 50 grand. So yeah, I mean, it's, it's definitely good. I mean, like you said, I could Google the answers to an algebra test, and be an expert on algebra for 7 minutes. But as far as whipping a guitar out when your friends are over, there's a slippery slope. It's either going to be good or it's going to be cringy. So
Yeah.
you really got to show up.
Absolutely. And so, back to the business now. Obviously you started in the cigarettes or pre-roll realm and have expanded to gummies and are definitely kind of focused on both of those product SKUs. Which one do you feel like? I mean, obviously the cigarette model was the basis, the blueprint for your business. But which of those models do you feel like has kind of the most potential in this space over time?
Mm, I think I mean I think the original, I definitely think cigarettes are going to be our kind of calling card. I think, as far as vertical integration goes, I think all the companies that are going to do really well in, you know, the food market are the ones that have been doing food for 100 years. I think, they'll probably vertically integrate and buy all those companies. I think what I got going on as far as the cigarettes goes, it's like it's niche enough, and big tobacco doesn't really like to do anything themselves, so they'll just throw a bunch of money at those kind of niche pockets and those niche markets just to make it go away.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I think for me, cigarettes, for the industry, I don't know, maybe vape. Vape might
Vape.
be the big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Which has obviously been the most held the most scrutiny with the vape gate or whatever you want to call it,
Vape
2 years
gate.
ago.
Yeah.
And then the complexities now of shipping that. But obviously, as we move forward, and then another question I had for you too is, as we move closer to this, again, this impending, just whether it's declassification or federal legalization of cannabis, which will ultimately ease up regulation for individual cannabinoids as well. Do you think that a lot of the industry is going to stay e-commerce, or do you feel like the brick and mortar is going to see a surge when things become more accessible? Or do you think it's going to, hold a healthy balance of what it looks like right now?
Um, I think it'll hold a healthy balance for sure. I think we'll get slowly more into the e-commerce space actually, just because you know I like I think the UK is they're saying that like 84% of the purchases in the UK are going to be online based. Um, so I think like the United States, we've tripled since 2019 as far as what's being purchased online and what's being purchased in store. Um, I think there's just a level of convenience there that, you know, our generation and the generations behind us are slowly getting more and more integrated into, like, I don't even think kids go to the mall anymore, not to be like
Mm.
that old guy, but like, I mean,
Easy, man. Easy, man. You're 24. All right. Don't be throwing around old.
yeah, I'm just saying, like, I think it's going to be all online and it's convenient, I think, the dealer is going to be the UPS guy, really. But yeah.
And then if there's one thing that you could change about the industry right now, and that could be regulation, education, or anything like that, what's the one thing that you'd like to see changed?
I just, I would like to, see I mean, it's all pretty good for me right now. I'd like maybe like a more of a blanket approach to this. There's like kind of a lot of confusion going on, and when the DEA releases a statement saying it's legal, but we're watching you, it's like, is this a right? Because it feels like a privilege kind of thing. Kind of feels like dad said it's okay to play out in the backyard, but he's like yelling at you every time you fucking pick up the football or something. So I don't know. I think maybe just treat it like it's a legal thing, like it's alcohol or something. Obviously regulate it a bit. There's still a lot of companies out there that are like putting putting stuff in it that they're not saying stuff about it, There's companies that are like mixing filler, and which is always going to be a thing, but if it's regulated, maybe it won't be that big of a deal, but I don't know. I guess just regulate it for sure, but stop making people that are obeying the law feel like criminals.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's a fair criticism of what's going on, right? Is just understanding that lines in the sand need to be drawn, but like defining those lines a little bit more than leaving them ambiguous, which is so much of what's happening around cannabis in any facet of the plant. Is people are making laws, but then they allow too much gray area, and then in that gray area there's inconsistencies, and so it's like, like we were talking about a little bit before this, what's right today, you can't tell if it's right, it's who is it right to. It might change based on what government regulatory body or anything like that. It's definitely confusing.
And they're playing with people's stresses. There's like 40,000 smoke shops in the United States, and most of which are owned by like mom and pops and stuff. And every night they got to worry, is my state going to freaking take this away tonight? It's just not really, it's like, it's not cool. People's livelihoods are on it, which is what America's supposed to be all about, is owning your own business and making it happen. So I don't know. It still feels like a witch hunt. It's just, there's no witches anymore, really. But
yeah, that's fair. Times are changing, man. So, for the people out there, before we get you up out of here, man, where can people find Vance Global?
Vance-global.com. It's all right there. You'll get some. I'll throw up some promo codes so we can get a good discount on there tonight, tomorrow, and this week. And Vance-global.com.
And that's where consumers can get stuff there. Wholesale people can get in touch with you there.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today on this podcast episode. Again, your story is a great story. I think it's inspiring, A, because of your age, B, because of just this exciting new industry. It's so new, and being able to take advantage of it as it's literally unfolding in front of us. And C, which I didn't know until we got on here, that you come from a music background. So I think that's a excellent point for a lot of our audience, and just myself as well. Now I'm rooting for you a little bit more, man. Knowing where you came from.
Awesome. So thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, no doubt, August. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on here with us, man. And to everyone else, this is the RMR podcast, man. This is how August helped turn $2,000 investment into $1 million Delta-8 THC company, man. This is a crazy story. I hope you guys learned something from it. And the musicians out there, I hope you learned something from this as well. Just knowing that hustle that you're putting in time and time, whether it's going towards music or will eventually transfer into another lane or industry, that hustle and passion, pursue that. That's going to take you where you need to get in life.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Mitch.